The crystalline corridors of the Galactic Medical Institute sparkled under artificial starlight as hundreds of alien students moved between classes. The massive space station orbited a peaceful blue dwarf star, far from any dangerous worlds or cosmic hazards. It was the perfect location for the galaxy's most prestigious medical school. Dr. Valthara clicked her mandibles nervously as she prepared for today's special announcement. The tall insectoid professor had taught xenobiology for over 50 standard years, but she had never dealt with anything quite like this. Her compound eyes reflected the soft lighting as she reviewed her notes one final time. The lecture hall buzzed with excitement. Students from dozens of species filled the curved rows of seats. Near the front sat the Aquarians, their blue skin glistening with moisture from the humidity pods attached to their chairs. Behind them, the delicate Ethereum perched on specially designed platforms, their gossamer wings folding and unfolding with nervous energy. The massive granite beings occupied reinforced seating in the back, their rock-like bodies requiring extra structural support. Each species represented the pinnacle of civilized evolution. They came from worlds of gentle rains and mild seasons, where the greatest natural disaster might be a particularly strong breeze or an unusually warm day. Their ancestors had evolved in paradise compared to the horror stories they whispered about certain forbidden worlds. "Students, please give me your attention," Dr. Valthera announced, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustic system. "Today marks a historic moment for our institute. For the first time in our 300-year history, we are welcoming an exchange student from what the galactic community classifies as a Deathworld." A collective gasp filled the chamber. Several Etherian students fluttered their wings in distress. The Aquarians' gills flapped rapidly, and even the normally stoic granite beings shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Please welcome student Jiho Park from the planet Earth." The entrance doors slid open with a soft hiss, and a figure walked through that seemed almost anticlimactic after the dramatic introduction. Jiho appeared remarkably ordinary at least by human standards. He stood about average height, with dark hair and kind eyes. His simple academy uniform looked no different from what any other student might wear. But the alien students knew better. They had heard the whispered stories passed down through generations of galactic travelers. Earth was a nightmare world of constant catastrophe. Its surface crawled with venomous predators. Its weather systems spawned devastating storms that could flatten entire cities, and its very ground shifted and cracked without warning. The fact that any species could evolve and survive on such a hellish planet seemed impossible. Jiho smiled as he looked around the lecture hall, seemingly unaware of the terror his presence inspired. "Hello everyone. I'm really excited to be here and learn about galactic medicine. I hope we can all be friends." His casual tone only made the situation more unsettling for his new classmates. How could someone from a death world speak so calmly? What kind of horrors had he witnessed that made him so relaxed in any environment? Dr. Valthera cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should begin with introductions. Students, please share your names and homeworlds with our new colleague." One by one, the aliens introduced themselves. Krivak, an Aquarian from the peaceful water world of Aquatica Prime, spoke in nervous, bubbling tones. Tisara, an Etherian from the garden moon of Silk Meadows, barely whispered her introduction. Morgith, a granite being from the stable crystal world of Stone Harbor, rumbled his name in deep, cautious tones. When the introductions finished, Krivak worked up the courage to ask the question that burned in everyone's minds. His blue skin darkened with anxiety as he spoke. "Student Jiho, forgive me for asking, but is it really true that your world has predatory weather patterns?" Jiho laughed, a sound that made several students jump in their seats. "Oh, you mean hurricanes and tornadoes? Sure, we get those pretty regularly. They're not too bad if you know they're coming. You just stay inside and wait for them to pass." The casual way he discussed planetary-scale disasters left the classroom speechless. On most civilized worlds, A strong windstorm was cause for planetary emergency protocols. Last month we had a small earthquake, Jiho continued conversationally. Nothing major, just a 6.2 on the Richter scale. Knocked some books off my shelf and rattled the windows a bit. My little sister slept right through it. Complete silence fell over the lecture hall. Several Etherian students had gone pale, their wings trembling. The Aquarian skills were working overtime, and even the mighty granite beings looked shaken. A 6.2 magnitude earthquake would completely destroy most of their homeworld cities and be remembered as a catastrophic disaster for generations. Yet this human spoke of it like a minor inconvenience, something so ordinary that a child could sleep through it. What kind of monsters were these humans, that such devastation barely registered as noteworthy? Dr. Valthara struggled to regain control of her classroom. She had expected some cultural adjustment issues, but nothing quite like this. How was she supposed to teach standard galactic medicine to someone whose very existence challenged everything they thought they knew about the limits of biological survival? The semester was going to be far more interesting than anyone had anticipated. The xenobiology laboratory stretched across an entire deck of the medical station, filled with specimens from thousands of worlds. Transparent containers lined the walls, each one carefully labeled and sealed to protect students from the dangerous materials inside. Advanced filtration systems hummed quietly, maintaining perfect atmospheric conditions for the delicate work of studying alien life forms. 3 days had passed since Jiho's arrival, and the other students were still adjusting to having a Deathworlder in their midst. During lectures, they found themselves stealing glances at him, fascinated by how normal he appeared, despite coming from such a terrifying world. He took notes like any other student, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed genuinely interested in learning about galactic medicine. Dr. Valthara had organized today's practical session around comparative toxicology. Students would examine tissue samples from various species to understand how different biological systems processed harmful substances. It was considered one of the safer laboratory exercises, using only mild specimens that posed minimal risk. When properly handled, Tissera fluttered nervously near her assigned workstation. The delicate Etherian student had always been careful during lab work, knowing that her gossamer wings and translucent skin made her more vulnerable than most species. Her homeworld of silk meadows had no dangerous creatures or toxic plants, leaving her people with little natural resistance to harmful substances. The accident happened so quickly that no one saw exactly how it occurred. Tessara was reaching for a scanning device when her wing brushed against a specimen container. The seal, weakened by age, cracked just enough to release a tiny amount of the preserved material inside. Within seconds, dark lines began spreading across Tessera's translucent skin like spider webs. The alien toxin, harmless to most species when properly contained, found her Etherian physiology completely defenseless. Her breathing became labored, and her normally shimmering wings dulled to a sickly gray color. Emergency protocols, Dr. Valthara shrieked, her compound eyes immediately recognizing the severity of the situation. Her mandibles clicked frantically as she activated the laboratory's emergency systems. All students, step back. Medical emergency in progress. Red warning lights began flashing throughout the lab as automated systems sealed the contaminated area. The other students pressed against the far walls, watching in horror as their classmate collapsed onto her workstation. Her friend Nixstar tried to approach, but was held back by safety barriers that had automatically deployed. The contamination readings are off the charts, announced the laboratory's artificial intelligence system. Toxin levels indicate fatal exposure for Etherian physiology. Emergency medical teams have been notified. Dr. Valthara rushed to the emergency medical cabinet, her 6 arms working frantically to prepare antitoxin treatments. But as she read the scanner results, her movements slowed. The toxin concentration in Tessera's system was already beyond what any known treatment could handle. According to every medical database in the galaxy, the student should have died within the first minute of exposure, while the medical staff scrambled to find solutions that did not exist. Jiho calmly walked to the general supply cabinet. His movements were unhurried, almost casual, as if he were preparing for a routine exercise rather than witnessing a medical emergency. "What are you doing?" gasped Nixstar, her own wings trembling with fear for her friend. "The toxin readings show she should be dead already. How can you be so calm?" Jiho pulled out basic supplies that could be found in any medical laboratory: distilled water, sodium chloride, potassium compounds, and several common minerals. His hands moved with practiced efficiency as he mixed them in precise proportions, creating what appeared to be nothing more than a simple saline solution. "Student Park, step away from the contaminated area immediately," Dr. Valthera ordered, but Jiho ignored her command. He approached Tissera with the same confidence he had shown during his first day introduction. The other students watched in amazement as Jiho gently lifted Tissera's head and began administering his improvised solution. His techniques looked primitive compared to the Institute's advanced medical technology. He used no scanners, no automated systems, no sophisticated equipment. Instead, he applied pressure to specific points on her body, using only his hands, as if he were following some ancient medical practice. "This is madness," whispered Morgith, the massive granite student whose rock-like physiology usually made him resistant to most toxins. No simple mineral solution could counteract that level of contamination. But within minutes, something impossible began happening. The dark veins spreading across Tissera's skin started to fade. Her breathing became steadier, and the natural shimmer began returning to her wings. Color flowed back into her translucent features, as if the toxin was simply dissolving away. "That should have killed you," Morgith said in a voice barely above a whisper. The poison concentration was lethal for any known species in the galaxy. "How are you still alive?" Tissera's eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly on Jiho's concerned face. She tried to speak, but could only manage a weak smile of gratitude. Jiho helped her sit up slowly, checking her pulse and breathing with the same casual expertise he had shown throughout the treatment. When he was satisfied that she was stable, he shrugged as if nothing unusual had happened. "Where I come from, we call that food poisoning," he said matter-of-factly. "My neighbor Minho got worse from eating expired kimchi last week. He was back to work the next day." The laboratory fell into stunned silence as the implications of his words sank in. This human had just treated a fatal poisoning, as if it were a minor stomach upset. The morning shift at the Galactic Medical Institute began like any other day. Students attended their regular classes while the station orbited peacefully around its blue dwarf star. The artificial gravity systems hummed softly, and the environmental controls maintained perfect atmospheric conditions throughout the massive facility. Without any warning, the space around the station began to shimmer with dangerous energy. A massive solar storm, far more powerful than anything the scientists had predicted, erupted from the nearby star. Waves of radiation and charged particles slammed into the station's protective shields with devastating force. The first sign of trouble came when the lights flickered throughout the medical facility. Emergency alarms began blaring as the station's defensive systems struggled to handle the unexpected assault. Within minutes, the shields began failing under the relentless bombardment of cosmic energy. Explosions echoed through the corridors as critical systems overloaded. The carefully maintained atmospheric pressure began fluctuating wildly as life support systems failed one by one. Radiation levels spiked to dangerous levels throughout most of the station, turning previously safe areas into death traps. Students and staff ran in panic as emergency barriers slammed down, sealing off the most damaged sections. The delicate Ditherian students collapsed first, their gossamer wings unable to function in the unstable atmosphere. The Aquarians gasped for breath as their specialized breathing apparatus failed, while even the hardy granite beings began showing signs of distress from the radiation exposure. Dr. Velthara's compound eyes reflected the flashing emergency lights as she coordinated the evacuation efforts. Her mandibles clicked rapidly as she communicated with the station's emergency systems, trying to establish safe zones where the various alien species could survive until rescue arrived. All students report to emergency shelters immediately. Her voice echoed through the station's communication system. Radiation levels are beyond safe limits for most species. Do not attempt to leave the protected areas under any circumstances. The reinforced emergency shelters had been designed to protect the station's inhabitants from exactly this type of cosmic disaster. Thick walls lined with radiation-absorbing materials created small pockets of safety within the chaos, but the shelters were not large, and many people remained trapped in the damaged sections of the station. Through the security monitors, the medical staff could see their colleagues and students scattered throughout the facility. Some were injured and unable to move, while others huddled in small groups, waiting for help that might not come in time. The radiation levels in those areas were climbing steadily, and soon they would become completely uninhabitable. We need to organize rescue teams, Dr. Velthara announced to the emergency staff gathered in the main shelter. But the radiation levels make it impossible for most species to survive outside these protected areas. I can help with rescue operations, Jiho said quietly, standing near the sealed emergency door that led to the most dangerous parts of the station. Every head in the shelter turned toward the human student. Dr. Velthara's compound eyes widened with alarm as she realized what he was suggesting. Absolutely not, she protested, her voice rising to a shriek. The radiation alone would kill you in minutes. The atmospheric pressure is completely unstable, and the temperature fluctuations would freeze or cook any living being. Jiho walked over to one of the portable scanners that the emergency teams had been using to monitor conditions outside the shelter. He studied the readings carefully, his expression remaining calm as he absorbed the data that had terrified everyone. Else this is about the same as a sunny day in Seoul after a mild solar flare, he said with the same casual tone he had used when discussing earthquakes and hurricanes. The radiation levels are actually lower than what we get during summer vacation at the beach. I'll be fine. The other survivors stared at him in disbelief. The scanner showed radiation levels that would kill most galactic species within minutes of exposure. Yet this human was comparing it to a pleasant day on his homeworld. Before anyone could stop him, Jiho began putting on one of the basic environmental suits stored near the emergency exit. The suit was designed for minor maintenance work, not for venturing into the hellish conditions that now existed throughout most of the station. Student Park, I absolutely forbid you to leave this shelter, Dr. Velthara commanded, but her words had no effect. Jiho sealed his helmet and activated the suit's basic life support systems. I'll bring back as many people as I can, he said through the suit's communication system. Just keep the shelter ready for casualties. The emergency door cycled open with a hiss of escaping atmosphere, and Jiho stepped into what should have been certain death. The door sealed behind him, leaving the other survivors to watch through security monitors as their human classmate ventured into the chaos. The damaged sections of the station looked like a war zone. Twisted metal and sparking electronics littered the corridors. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the walls, while smoke from electrical fires reduced visibility to just a few meters. The atmosphere itself shimmered with radiation that would have been instantly fatal to most galactic species. But Jiho moved through this devastation as if he were taking a casual walk through a park. His environmental suit registered the hostile conditions, but his body seemed completely unaffected by the chaos around him. He walked with purpose, checking each room and corridor for survivors who needed help. The medical team watched in amazement through the security cameras as their human student performed what they considered impossible rescues, moving through areas that should have killed him instantly. The emergency medical bay filled with the sounds of urgent activity as rescue teams brought in the survivors from the damaged sections of the station. Medical staff worked frantically to treat radiation sickness, atmospheric pressure injuries, and various trauma cases from the solar storm disaster. But nothing had prepared them for what Jiho carried through the doors. Dokran, the massive granite student, hung limply in Jiho's arms despite weighing nearly 3 times as much as the human. The silicon-based being's rock-like body showed terrible damage from the fallen debris that had crushed him in the collapsed laboratory section. Dark cracks ran through his crystalline structure like fractures in a broken mountain, and strange mineral compounds leaked from his wounds. "Get him to the emergency table immediately," Dr. Velthara ordered, her compound eyes taking in the severity of the injuries. The medical staff carefully transferred Dokran onto the reinforced examination platform designed for granite physiology. The diagnostic scanners began their work, but the results made everyone step back in alarm. Dokran's internal crystalline matrices were completely shattered. The living rock formations that served as his organs were fractured beyond anything the medical databases had ever recorded. Mineral blood flowed from deep fissures in his body, carrying with it dangerous chemical compounds that made the air around him shimmer with toxic vapors. "His condition is critical," announced the medical computer system. "Multiple organ failure detected. Internal crystalline structure compromised at fundamental levels." Dr. Velthara studied the readings with growing despair. In all her years of medical practice, she had never seen trauma this severe in a granite being. Their rock-like bodies were incredibly durable, but when they did suffer major damage, the injuries were almost impossible to treat. "We need to stabilize the mineral blood flow," she told her medical team. "Prepare the crystalline regeneration chamber and contact the granite medical specialists on their homeworld." But as the medical staff began their preparations, the scanners delivered worse news. The toxic compounds leaking from Dokran's wounds were creating a hostile environment around the patient. The acids produced by his damaged organs would dissolve most medical equipment on contact. "The caustic levels are too high," reported the head medical technician, a nervous Aquarian whose blue skin had turned pale with worry. "Our surgical instruments can't function in that chemical environment. The acids will destroy anything we try to use." Dr. Velthara's mandibles clicked with frustration as she realized the impossible situation they faced. Even if they could develop a treatment plan, they had no way to actually implement it. The very nature of Dokran's injuries made him untreatable with standard galactic medical technology. "This is impossible," she declared, her voice filled with professional defeat. The precision required to repair internal crystalline matrices, combined with the hostile materials involved. No known species could perform such surgery. Jiho stepped forward from where he had been quietly observing the medical team's efforts. His basic environmental suit was scorched and damaged from his rescue mission, but he appeared completely unharmed by the ordeal. "I can try," he said simply, beginning to remove his protective gear. The medical staff stared at him in shock. The toxic vapors rising from Dokran's wounds were already forcing them to wear protective breathing apparatus. The idea of anyone working directly with those caustic materials seemed like suicide. "Student Park, you cannot be serious, Doctor," Velthara protested. "The chemical exposure alone would dissolve organic tissue on contact. No living being could survive direct contact with those compounds." Jiho approached the examination table where Dokran lay unconscious. The mineral blood continued to leak from the fractured rock formations, creating small pools of acid that ate through the floor plating. The toxic atmosphere around the patient grew thicker by the minute. "On my world, we study geological formations all the time," Jiho explained as he examined the injuries. "My sister Sora is a geology student, and she works with much more dangerous mineral compounds during her field research." He moved to the medical supply cabinet and began gathering tools that looked more appropriate for mining operations than surgical procedures. Heavy-duty manipulators designed for handling dangerous materials, pressure applicators used in industrial processing, and chemical-resistant probes that could function in hostile environments. The gathered medical staff watched in amazement as Jiho's hands proved capable of the impossible. His fingers, hardened by evolution on a death world, could apply the exact pressure needed to manipulate Dokran's living crystalline structures without being crushed by the forces involved. His enhanced human constitution allowed him to work directly in the toxic atmosphere that would have killed most galactic species within minutes. Jiho treated Dokran's body like a complex geological formation that happened to have circulation systems. He applied principles from Earth's geological sciences to alien physiology, using techniques that resembled fieldwork more than traditional surgery. His movements were precise and confident, as if he were repairing a damaged crystal cave system rather than performing emergency medical treatment. Hours passed as Jiho worked with industrial-grade tools, demonstrating the delicate touch of an artist despite using equipment designed for the harshest environments. The medical staff could only watch in stunned silence as their human student performed what they considered impossible surgery. Slowly, Dokran's vital signs began to stabilize. The dangerous mineral compounds stopped leaking from his wounds as the internal crystalline matrices began to heal themselves under Jiho's careful guidance. News of the impossible surgery spread through the Galactic Medical Institute like wildfire. Within hours, every student and faculty member had heard about the human who performed crystalline matrix repair using mining tools in his bare hands. The story grew with each telling, but even the most exaggerated versions could not capture the reality of what the medical staff had witnessed. Dr. Velthara found herself fielding communication requests from medical facilities across the galaxy. Word had reached the outer colonies about a Deathworlder who could treat patients that conventional galactic medicine had given up as hopeless. The requests came from desperate doctors dealing with cases that defied all known medical protocols. "We have a patient who was exposed to industrial solvents that should have killed him instantly," reported a physician from the mining world of Ferris Prime. "He's somehow still alive, but his physiology is too damaged for our equipment to handle safely." Another call came from a research station near a pulsar. "Our scientists survived direct exposure to exotic radiation that scrambled her cellular structure. We need someone who can work in conditions that would destroy our medical instruments." Each request described patients whose injuries or conditions were too extreme, too alien, or too dangerous for standard medical treatment. They were the cases that hospitals across the galaxy had classified as impossible to treat. Within 3 weeks, the Institute's governing board made an unprecedented decision. They established a new department dedicated to what they termed extreme environment medicine. The field would focus on medical techniques that could function in hostile conditions and treat patients whose physiology pushed the boundaries of what was considered survivable. Jiho found himself appointed as the department's first teaching assistant, despite being just a student himself. His unique background and demonstrated abilities made him the only qualified candidate for the position. The Institute had never promoted a student to faculty status before, but then again, they had never encountered anyone quite like Jiho. The announcement of his promotion sparked intense interest among the student body. Tisara, now fully recovered from her toxin exposure, was among the first to request enrollment in the new program. "I want to learn these techniques," she declared during a meeting with the academic advisors. "If someone from a death world can develop methods to save lives that we thought were beyond help, then maybe we can adapt those techniques for our own people." Morgith, the massive granite student whose friend Dokran now walked the halls again, thanks to Jiho's intervention, voiced similar enthusiasm. "If we can adapt even a fraction of Deathworlder medicine to our own practices, imagine how many patients we could help who are currently considered untreatable." The response was overwhelming. Students from every species represented at the Institute applied for admission to the Extreme Environment Medicine program. They wanted to learn what they had begun calling survival medicine techniques that could function when everything else failed. 6 months after the solar storm disaster, Jiho stood before his first official class as a teaching assistant. The lecture hall was packed beyond capacity, with students sitting in the aisles and standing along the walls. Representatives from dozens of species had gathered to learn from the human, who had challenged everything they thought they knew about the limits of medical treatment. "Good morning, everyone," Jiho began, his voice carrying easily through the hall's acoustic system. "Today we're going to start learning how to think differently about medical challenges. Most galactic medicine focuses on working in ideal conditions with perfect equipment, but sometimes patients need help when conditions are far from ideal." He moved to the demonstration table, where various tools were laid out, some recognizable medical instruments, others that looked like they belonged in a construction site or mining operation. "The key principle of survival medicine is adaptability," Jiho continued. "When your specialized equipment fails, when the environment becomes hostile, when the patient's condition is beyond your normal protocols, you need to be able to improvise solutions, using whatever resources are available." The students listened with rapt attention as their human instructor began demonstrating techniques that seemed to violate every principle of safe medical practice they had learned. He showed them how to create effective treatments from basic minerals and simple compounds, how to apply mechanical principles to biological problems, and how to work safely in conditions that would normally be considered completely hostile to medical intervention. Krivak, the Aquarian student who had once been terrified of Jiho, now sat in the front row, taking detailed notes. His webbed hand shot up with a question that made the entire class hold their breath. "Teacher Jiho, I've been wondering about something," he said nervously. "If your medicine is this terrifying, what are Earth's actual diseases like? I mean, if you need such extreme treatments for normal medical care, your illnesses must be absolutely horrible." Jiho grinned, the same expression that had once terrified his classmates, but now filled them with anticipation for another impossible revelation about his homeworld. "Actually, most of you would probably be immune to our diseases," he said, with characteristic casualness. "Evolution made us fight much scarier things than bacteria. Our immune systems had to handle parasites that could survive in lava, viruses that thrived in radiation, and infections that could eat through solid rock." The class exchanged nervous glances, once again reminded that their human instructor represented a level of biological impossibility that they were only beginning to understand. From the back of the classroom, Dr. Velthara observed the lesson, with her compound eyes reflecting pride and amazement. The galaxy had found its most unlikely healers in the children of humanity's nightmare world,